Today marks International Jazz Day, a day celebrated annually around the world, bringing together musicians, educators and jazz enthusiasts to honor the cultural significance and rich history of jazz music. It also focuses on promoting education, cross-cultural understanding and collaboration through the shared love of jazz music. By bringing people together from different backgrounds and cultures, jazz can serve as a tool for promoting empathy, dialogue and cooperation. For more on this, we are joined by Mandla Mlangeni, a trumpeter. Mandla, very good to have you on the show. Appreciate your time. Let's talk about where your love for jazz started and what inspired it.
My love for jazz started as soon as I started picking up the trumpet. Influenced by our one and great Hugo Ribatika, of whom I've had the pleasure of actually giving tribute in New York, celebrating his contributions to South African jazz. And my influences range from Bob Louis Moholo to Louis Armstrong and all of those. Yeah, so I started when I was very young, at the age of 14.
Okay, yes. 14 it is. Now, you talk about Hugh, you also talk about Louis Armstrong. So yes. There you've got South African jazz, you've got jazz from the US. Yes. In the clip a little while ago, we talked about, in fact, we saw Ethio jazz. Yes. What are some of your influences, and how do you rate the various genres of jazz from across the globe?
Well, jazz comes from America, very much, and it was transplanted here. But we managed to make our own through divergent influences, indigenous music here. And then in terms of African influences, Ethio jazz for me is very special. It's very particular, and also reminds me of its also sounds and how they fuse their own music, and also with the influence of jazz music, American jazz music. And coming back to South African music, I think it's very much influenced by our struggle and basically what was happening in America. Yeah, so American jazz is basically what
So are you suggesting that jazz tells a story, or is an instrument for telling various stories?
Jazz music is more than just telling a story. It actually weaves a common thread of combining people of different cultures, different backgrounds together, and also it allows them to share their experiences. More than anything else, also jazz music is a way of also self-expression, and also allows you to actually go anywhere in the world and actually be able to play it, provided that you know the music and know the traditions of the music.
So, International Jazz Day, what does it mean to you, and how do you plan on celebrating it?
Well, every day for me is International Jazz Day. I owe my being to all the influences that come before me. But today makes it very special because is also a celebration of a jazz icon, Duke Ellington, whose birthday it is today. So, and how I celebrate is by blasting jazz music from the morning until evening. So my neighbors are always in for a delight.
So I've always thought for the longest time that jazz music was about the older generation. But clearly you started when you were 14.
Yeah, jazz music is more about, it's a discipline of actually doing it. And jazz music is for the young people. It's best enjoyed by the young and best played by the old. Because it gives you the experience and also allows you to actually see other perspectives and see other worlds. And jazz music in many ways is, how can I explain it? Jazz music encompasses everything. It's like the English language, which is spoken all over the world, but has its own idiosyncrasies wherever you go. Just like when you go to Jamaica, people in Jamaica speak their patois in a particular way. If you go to Nigeria, or if you go to Australia, it's a language, and it's expressed.
So has your language, has your jazz language evolved from the time you were 14 till today?
Yeah. My vocabulary. As a child, you learn to speak from your mother or your parents, and as you grow, you actually now develop a vocabulary as you go to school. So that's what jazz for me is actually done. So it has allowed me to actually start learning the instrument, start playing in bands, and from there now progress to having my own bands, and then also writing my own music, releasing my own music as well.
So talk to us about some of your upcoming projects.
Yes, I've actually got a gift for you. This is our latest album. I'll leave this here and you can collect it after the thing. Our latest album is entitled The Oratory of a Forgotten Youth by my band, the Mandla Freedom Ensemble, which will be available Next week, actually, on the 5th of May, we're launching it on all media platforms, and we're actually commemorating Africa Day, which is happening next month, with a performance at the Wits Great Hall on the 27th of May.
So give us again the title of that album.
The Oratorio of a Forgotten Youth. Oratorio pertains to actually a classical form of music that precedes the opera, and was usually was usually performed during special days, such as your Easters or your Christmas days. One of the proponents of the oratorios was Handel's Messiah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Johann Sebastian Bach.
You'd promised not to perform, but I appreciate that little.
No, just to give people a glimpse of where it comes from, and actually my capabilities as a performer. But I'm not really a singer. But yeah, they can catch me. They catch us. I'm actually performing alongside a hallmark of other bands that are based in Johannesburg, such as The Brother Moves On. Will also be accompanied by a sand artist, and also with a string quartet and a fully fledged choir.
So you talk about the oratorio of a forgotten youth.
Yes.
Does it suggest, does it suggest that this is a different sound to what you normally do?
No, it's an influence. It's an influence of the sounds that I've grown up with. I've grown up with classical music. I've grown up with pop music. I've grown up with choir music and music from the church. And in a way, is actually is a cauldron of all those influences and presenting it to the wider public.
You raised something that I particularly like, and I picked something up where there's often a challenge, and I'll go to the church where the older generation like it in a particular way. They're very conservative. They may not like drums, may not like certain instruments, for instance. What are your thoughts around infusing modern sounds into the integrity or the culture, the staidness, if you will, of an institution such as the church?
I mean, the church for me it depends where you come from. And it also depends how you want to.
Come from?
From where I come from, I grew up Catholic. So it was also very challenging to actually bring those instruments. But we were part of that youth that were actually starting out playing instruments. And we got to actually influence how the youth accepted that were made to feel part of the community and making it more accessible. So we did that by actually also performing instruments. We got guitars, we had trumpets, we had violins, and that's where I actually first got my skills as a composer and arranger, because sometimes in certain church service or certain processions, I'd have the privilege of actually arranging some of the hymnals.
So you've talked about some collaborations. How important are collaborations in growing certainly your fan base or growing a particular genre?
It's the lifeblood of the art scene. And particularly with this project that I'm doing on the 27th, I'm collaborating with quite a number of esteemed artists, such as your poet, Lesego Rampolokeng. I'm also collaborating with the string quartet, known as the Resonance String Quartet, which dabbles both in classical pop music and the jazz idiom. And we've also got a choir that's predominantly gospel, but also is now dabbling in jazz. So collaboration is what actually is the propulsion and actually getting your name known out there to wider circles. And also keeps you relevant and also keeps you on your toes in many ways.
Now, you've talked about paying tribute to Brother Hugh, I think, in the US, if I'm not mistaken.
Definitely.
So your work obviously involves a fair amount of travel. Which is your favorite destination when you perform? Let's talk about certainly the reception that you've received across the globe.
Okay, I'll talk with the most recent, which was the one in New York. We presided over the presentation of the what do you call it? He was given a lifetime achievement award for his contribution towards South African music. And I must say, New York strikes me as the place that I'd like to perform more in. It's a bustling scene; it never sleeps, and it has a thriving jazz community that I still want to explore.
Now, you started when you were 14 years old. There are obviously a lot of young viewers that are glued to the screen right now, or might watch it on our YouTube channel, and they're asking the question, how do I know I'm sufficiently talented? How do I break into the jazz scene? And what is out there for me?
And that's the thing about music, and that's the thing about arts education that doesn't happen much in schools in South Africa. And I think it's not so much the talent. It's actually what the music or the arts teaches you is the discipline and the passion to actually also exercise different parts of your faculty or your brain. And actually having more of that actually has spillage on other ways. Like playing an instrument allows you to develop your motor facility and allows you to develop your ability in logical thinking and also develop your ability in maths, because music in a way is a science. It is a science, apart from also being a form of expression. And I'd say, and my advice to people is to support the music more than anything, is also to attend the performances, and any way that you can support by liking, subscribing to various artists in the community. And it's through these difficult times. I mean, in recent times we've had COVID, and that's had a very big impact on the live music scene. We've seen a lot of venues closing, and now many musicians, particularly in Johannesburg, don't have any venues to perform in. So, I mean, a little goes a long way, either by downloading our music on iTunes, Spotify, or the Bandcamp, as you might know, certainly helps to that degree. And actually, having our music also propagated in media, in the media spaces. Not enough radio stations actually play our music, and all of them are our blanket genres, such as your pop. And I've got nothing against pop. I've got nothing against the new music, but I think there's not enough space in the South African media that actually pushes forth jazz music.
Not enough space, or insufficient desire, if you will, for one of a better description, to push your type of music. And while we're at it, let's talk about your engagement process with the various channels or stations in order to get your music played or heard.
Well, that's always a challenge, because in order for me to get engagement on whatever channels there are, the media spaces, I would need PR. I mean, not many people can actually afford that. And also, it's not just about, it's a cultural asset. So, and I believe jazz music, or the music that we perform, played a very pivotal role prior to the advent of our democracy in actually conscientizing many of our people. And you find it now being relegated to the dustbin of our social history. And I think it should now also still take a prominent role in the spaces. I don't think that jazz music, or how people perceive music, to only be performed on Sundays. Jazz music is not a music that's just performed on Sundays, or is not music that's just enjoyed by uncles or
the old-timers, yeah.
Or the old-timers, or for whiskey drinkers. And that's how it's mainly marketed in media spaces. So I believe that having access to actually public viewing of the spaces, having also sponsorships. I mean, you find sponsorships of sports teams into the millions, but hardly that happens. Hardly any of that happens when it comes to jazz musicians or cultural activities in South Africa.
Mandla, I was having a conversation with someone, and they said to me, nobody owes you anything. And the reason I raise this is because the question that I'd like to ask is, how much of this rests on your shoulders and the shoulders of other musicians in the jazz industry to come together as a grouping of jazz artists and say, ladies and gentlemen, how do we push our agenda? How do we push the envelope as jazz musicians, as opposed to waiting for people on the sidelines to say, hey, you know what, Mandla and co. do exist?
I don't think that is the main challenge that we I don't think that is the challenge. I think because always, as a music community, we've always banded together, and I think it's more the streams of support. You find, I'll give you an example, which is classical music. It's enjoyed by less than 5% of the population, but enjoys extensive support. It's just received a huge boost from government, I think to the tune of maybe 76 million. But hardly, and I don't think this music has been institutionalized to that end. And I don't think there is an effort on part of government to actually give us that support. As much as we'd like to actually...
Is there an association of jazz artists?
There are quite a few associations of jazz artists. There's actually a grouping.
Are they having conversations with government?
We have government. I mean, part of our conversations actually also do the disbursement of funds and how slow they are. And also part of that conversation is also with speaking to relevant stakeholders. And because of the advent of COVID and how slow the rollout was in terms of that fund, it also affected us, it also affected business. So, I mean, the conversations are ongoing, and I hear your point. That's something that we also need to do more of.
Well, Mandla, it's been great having you on the show, but give us a reminder again, your album launches May 5th, and then there's a big concert to look forward to in the month of May. Just to bring us up to speed with those two issues again.
And this is happening, this is the Oratorio of Forgotten Youth, happening on the 27th of May at the Wits Great Hall. Tickets can be bought online, and it features the likes of your, the Brother Moves On, the Hugo Ribatika, there's a Sen artist. There's also the Resonance String Quartet, and also the Vivacious Sounds.
And you and your band too?
Yes, the Mandla Freedom Ensemble.
Fantastic. Mandla Mlangeni is a trumpeter, and he was speaking to us today on International Jazz Day.